Hello and welcome to the State of Events, the premier podcast for the event industry. My name is Sonia Alcazar Collier, your host and owner of Cinch Productions. What's up, friends? Sonia here from the State of Events podcast. Hey, everyone in this season is recording from home, as we know. And so we appreciate in advance any grace that you can give us on volume levels for the audio, any background noises. A lot of us are recording with kids in the home. And so we're just so excited to be able to bring you cutting edge information, but it is at the mercy of just the circumstances that we're in. And so as you listen to this podcast and any others that we put out, we appreciate in advance any grace that you give us on any editing and error issues that you might find on your end. Thank you so much, and we look forward to giving you more State of the Events. In this episode, we'll be hearing from 3 industry professionals about the current impact they've experienced and the future of events. Our guests today are Teresa Babbitt, an event producer and small business owner specializing in the nonprofit sector. We also have Ivy Summer, owner of Voulay Events and a certified wedding planner. And joining us is also Brett Collier, a seasoned venue manager and co-founder of Cinch Events and Productions. Yes, I'm sure you can gather that Brett and I share the same last name, and he is my husband. We are 2 event professionals who happen to be a husband and wife team. So welcome, everyone. Hello, hello.
Hey.
Glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, it's a privilege just to spend time talking with you guys, and I'm excited to learn from you all.
Likewise.
So guys, I wanted to talk a little bit today about some of the impact that we all have been experiencing in our own sectors of this industry. So, we'll get a little bit into what we all do, but we have someone covering, the venue management and the venue component of this. And we obviously have someone from the event industry focusing on the celebratory events and weddings. And then we have someone from the nonprofit sector. And the purpose of that is I really feel it's important for you listeners to get a sort of a holistic view of what's going on in the event industry. This podcast is intended to always be giving current and up-to-date information on world events as it pertains to the event industry. And so it's really important that we hear how all of us are affected in the different lanes that we sort of run in the event industry. And so Teresa, I would love to start with you. And if you can, first of all, just tell us a little bit about your company, a little bit about you and what you do. And then I would love to hear a little bit about how you are experiencing some impact with the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, so I've been, I kind of got swept into the events world as I worked for a nonprofit, a faith-based nonprofit. And that was about, 10 years ago. And we really, Chasing Fences is my company, and we really focus on, there are moments in life that are significant enough to mark off and set aside. And I think about that in terms of kind of building a fence or markers around an event. And so we just love planning and helping to really set aside significant moments so that you can look back on them, right? If it's worth planning an event for, it's significant. So, but my background has been very broad in the nonprofit sector, from large faith-based worship and prayer gatherings in stadiums to concerts and conferences, all the way to smaller transformational retreats. And it's just been a fun journey. And I love watching people's dreams come alive and their lives impacted. So the nonprofit world is very unique in the sense that many of their events actually are fundraising their yearly budget, right? Such as galas and things like that. So so there's that. And it's also the main way some nonprofits service their constituents. It tends to all be event-based. Whether it's large events or small events. So this has extremely impacted the nonprofit sector, but it's been really fun to watch people get very, very creative. You're seeing that across the board in every sphere of society, I think.
Right.
But it's a huge opportunity at the same time, I believe.
What are some of the things that you've noticed, like in terms of what we're experiencing now is, sort of the meat of our lockdown, if you will. But at the onset of the lockdown, how did some of your clients respond to what was ahead, which was obviously a lot of uncertainty, but did they call you and say, hey, like, we're going to stop everything, or did they ask you for a plan of how to proceed? What was sort of that initial response that they turned to you to help them with?
Right. It was, we were all in an unknown world, right? So everyone, I felt from every angle, was fumbling, trying to figure it out as information was coming, first at a trickle and then at a very flood-like fashion, right? So one example in particular, well, two really, working with consulting brides, a few brides in my life, and then also working with a nonprofit in collaboration with another events organization on their gala. It was very interesting. I did a venue walkthrough with a nonprofit in the LA area about a week and a half before lockdown. And as we're going through the venue, it was hard to get all of us to take it seriously, right? And so I know at one point, yeah, and I'm like, okay, we're walking through the venue and I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, so we can put a hand sanitation center there and there and there. And they were like, why? And I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, actually, we should probably be thinking about postponing your event. And this is like, and I wasn't the main person on the event. And so I felt a little bad, but I looked at my friend and was like, we need to look at alternative dates. And so, and it was maybe March 8th or 9th, right? And because that venue already was taking a lot of protocols, they're cleaning things. And so right away, I said, okay, let's send a communication right away. Let all the people who've already registered for this event know that you're taking it seriously, know that you are making adjustments, and let them know the cleaning protocols of the venue and all, just those really proactive steps, right? But then within a week, they're realizing, okay, we really need to postpone this thing. And it was just crazy times because they waited, I think, 48 hours. And within 48 hours, all of their secondary date options were gone. And so they went from having a gala that was at the beginning of the kind of fundraising event season to the end of the event season. And that just becomes a really challenging thing when people have already been going to galas for a couple months and they've given. And so that's just one example. I think another one, I've seen that happen with brides too. And another one, there's an organization I'm affiliated with that does stadium gatherings, and they had 2 or 3 planned in 2020. And they are literally looking at it going, okay, once we know what some of these large sports outlets are doing, then we will know if stadiums are even available. But it's like, the question is, do we wait till still do this in 2020, or do we wait till 2021?
Right.
Because you have to begin thinking about the impact of your mobilization efforts, your marketing efforts,
Right.
and just people's psychology. Like, will they be ready to go to a large gathering anytime in 2020? So these are the kinds of questions we've been asking. I don't know if am I answering your question?
Yes. And
Okay.
what's interesting is that, you all were going to, in your first example, you all were going to, to look at a venue for a gala, which, just in my experience, this is a huge fundraising and donor engagement event.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, so obviously you had to postpone, but did your client then actually ask you to support them in figuring out, like, okay, so what does fundraising look like in this season? How are we going to stay afloat? Or were they not really engaging with you on that front?
In this particular client, we didn't engage in that conversation, but I have engaged in that conversation with another nonprofit that I work with almost exclusively in this season. And we are asking really big questions, like, what is it because a lot of the areas that and I don't know if this will answer your question or not, but a lot of the areas that this particular nonprofit services, they're in the developing world. And so right now, some of their issues are not just COVID and medical supplies, it's what's called upstream issues like poverty and starvation because people are out of work. So we are really creatively thinking through online, digital, viral fundraising campaigns. And I would say to this nonprofit within their gala, like get creative. Everyone and their mom is online right now. Every man, woman, and child is on the internet. So let's like everyone else leverage it and do what we can to engage creatively. I think it would be awesome to do a virtual auction of some kind or silent auction. Like if we're talking about like the gala world, there are ways, I think a lot of the elements that we would have taken into that venue, and this particular organization, it's their 10-year anniversary. It was supposed to be a huge celebration, a huge party. So it's a big bummer. So we all just sat there and we're like, this stinks, man. I think there are some elements that can get translated to a virtual audience. And those people who had already purchased tickets, they are sold. They already want to support the organization. So I would say to nonprofits, like those people that have your back already and who've been invested in you, they do not want to see you close their doors. There's a reason they're investing in you. They care about your constituents. They care about the people that you are servicing, right? If it's an anti-trafficking organization, they care about those people. If it's for at-risk youth, the people who are giving to you care about that. So just keep them in a loop. Communicate.
Right. I think something's interesting that I'm hearing too is that whatever the goal or the mission or the vision of that particular nonprofit was, when, just the nature of the word nonprofit, it means that you're probably doing something in which you're giving back, or the majority of what you do is it's this sort of giving back mentality. So it seems like, if anything, the donor and the fundraiser component shouldn't necessarily even drop. If anything, there's an opportunity for it to skyrocket because people want to give during this time because they know that your nonprofit efforts are going to help either, the pandemic end or get people through it or whatever that case may be. Can you talk a little bit about some of the financial best practices that a nonprofit can practice right now with this idea of, saving for a rainy day type of savings, but also continuing to be sort of that funnel of, philanthropic efforts of shelling money out where needed? What are some of the best practices that a nonprofit can use?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very tricky topic, and I agree. What I've been saying to those particularly in one nonprofit I'm working for, the phrase I keep saying is people want to be generous. And I know that people want to be generous because I want to be generous. Like I want to come through this thing going, man, I held nothing back. Like right. I had what I needed, but I didn't neglect those that also had need. Right. And so for obviously like the example I gave with the nonprofit who is trying to address some what we'll call upstream issues. They actually got together with their board of trustees. I would say, make sure you're talking to your constituents and make sure you're talking to your board, right? And this particular organization, they have an endowment that unfortunately, like for a lot of nonprofits, if they have grants or they have foundations that are supporting them, or if they have an endowment that they use as some of their base budget, a lot of those things are wrapped in the stock market, and a lot of people have taken a big hit. Like, and this nonprofit also has taken, like, they've lost. I mean, we're all hoping it will recover, right? And probably it will but they lost maybe 30% of a large endowment they had, but yet they're still getting together and going, okay, what is the balance between wisdom, and it's a faith-based organization, and faith, and stepping out and being generous? And so they went to their board and just said, where is our margin? So really communicate with your board. That is a huge thing, obviously, in the nonprofit world. Get your people behind you. In this organization, they're giving pretty generously to some global efforts, and we're also thinking, how can we extend that? And so we're going through right now brainstorming a virtual campaign of sorts where we're going to be raising funds, but right now we haven't launched it yet because we need to get all the back end under control, right? So I would say best practices are communicate, talk to your board, get a clear plan, figure out your back office. Like if you're going to funnel funds to other places or other organizations, make sure you have it all clean, because the last thing you want when you come through this is to have a messy back end that you have to figure out and then you have to answer for, right? So
it's so good.
And then just
really
and give people an opportunity. They want to give to need. Like there's need, and and invite them into it. They want to be generous.
It sounds like that saying I like to use, don't be someone's no for them. Just put it out there, express the need, and allow people to have the opportunity to buy into that or to decline. So that's so great. Thank you for that. I think that it's important that nonprofits really feel empowered through their efforts during this time. So, and thank you for the work that you're doing with them to support with all your expertise and everything, because I know that where would we be in our world, particularly right now, if we didn't have the nonprofit structure? So thank you for that. I want to move on a little bit to, thank you, by the way, Teresa, for that. Oh, go ahead.
Can I offer one quick resource? There's an article called Leading Beyond the Blizzard by a team of people, the primary author named Andy Crouch. And it's really geared toward faith-based nonprofits and entrepreneurs, but it's been an extremely helpful article to me. It's called Leading Beyond the Blizzard. I can send you the link, but that's just, anyway,
right.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that. And I'll definitely get any listener who wants more information on that. I'll definitely put some communications out after this airs. Ivy, I want to transition a little bit to you. Hello. Thank you so much for joining. Obviously, you can't see as our listeners, but Ivy is actually in Greece.
Yes, I am. Hi, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So we're America based. So what is the climate over there for you in Greece?
It is definitely strong into springtime. We've got some fair weather, some rain, and looking forward to start gardening now that I have much more time to indulge in a new hobby.
We all have new hobbies these days. I guarantee. I think my husband's is probably cooking.
Cooking.
Yeah, that's your
Bike
new thing.
riding.
Bike riding,
Very
yeah,
much
that's your
so.
new thing right now too.
Getting the clean air that's available.
Yes. Oh my gosh. For those of you listening who are in LA, aren't you amazed by the air quality here? Oh my gosh. I'm like, can we have weeks of actually like no driving? I think it would be great. I have no allergies. It's been amazing. Ivy, can you please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes. So I am a certified wedding planner and master in business administration. I have over 10 years of experience working with budget-conscious couples in the Bay Area. I've been based in Greece since February 2019, gaining experience in destination, celebrity, and luxury wedding planning, and my independent travel agency specializing in Italy, Greece, Scotland, and Ireland.
Wow.
Before I moved from San Francisco, I planned and coordinated the Guinness World Record attempt at largest public wedding in 2015.
Wow.
I introduced the Cannabis Wedding Expo to California in 2016, and I launched America's first cannabis art museum tours and cannabis yacht tours from 2016 through 2018. And by the winter of 2019, I launched my online wedding planning course for couples who want to plan their wedding from anywhere in the world with the resources, tools, and worldwide network of a pro. That's called Plan Your Wedding Like a Pro.
Wow.
And just this month, I wrote and published the world's first book about how to plan a wedding in a pandemic called Poise Over Panic.
Come on. Look, the innovation during this season. Wow. That's so great, Ivy, too, because obviously I've done some research on you and I've been following you. But what I think is so amazing about your book, and it gives me chills thinking about it, is that I think in the context of events, we as the producer or planner, we have to have this sort of, what do we do in a crisis of any kind? But now we get to use the crises of all crises and give people some real resources that, honestly, if you have small potato crises, you're using your book as sort of the, the standard. And then I can just scale down of like how crises am I experiencing right now during my event?
Yeah, there was no way I could have foreseen that. But yeah, I will definitely be using my own book as a guide for the smaller crises.
Yes, thank you for that.
Use your own book, and you can do the Guinness Book of World Records event after a pandemic.
Right.
And
I
actually, don't give her the idea. She's totally gonna do that. So great. Ivy, can you actually talk a little bit about your clientele and maybe give us some examples of, at the onset of our sort of global lockdown, what did you do for some of your wedding clients? How did you restructure? How did you support them? What is a wedding looking like right now?
Yeah. So, like I said, I couldn't have foreseen this, but I'm really glad that I did pivot to online wedding planning course for couples last year when I did. I have been interviewing couples throughout my career just for market research, right? And a lot of the times I like to ask them, what is the experience of wedding planning for you? Across these couples, some of them are my clients, some of them aren't. Some of them have had wedding planners that they've hired for their wedding, and some have not. And what I got the opportunity to do in these interviews from Thanksgiving 2019 through April 2020, I've gotten to ask these questions of how has this been for you as a couple, firsthand experience in dealing with the challenges of the pandemic. And I've learned that some of my couples have had a betrayal of trust when it comes to vendors who have not followed through, have not been able to be flexible. Fortunately, we haven't seen much of the inflexibility of vendors. Many are hardworking, really willing to be flexible and accommodate their couples, whatever this pandemic has thrown their way. But I have had one client specifically whose venue filed for bankruptcy just before those shelter-in-place orders went into effect in the Bay Area. That's been particularly tough because, she put down just about $7,000 into this venue. The venue was offering 100% refund up until 3 months before the wedding. This is a September wedding, 2020. And at this point, she realized, I could just ask for the full refund. But the venue that claimed bankruptcy wasn't able to give her any refund nor any instruction on how to file an administrative claim or obviously take any kind of legal action. So she's been quite stranded in this experience.
Ivy, did your client have event insurance? And if they did, were they able to, did this cover that?
Unfortunately, most wedding insurance companies will not cover any claims related to the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's considered an act of God.
Right. In most vendor contracts, I tell my clients, you need to look for that force majeure act of God clause that covers any kind of loss related to any outside force that impedes on a vendor's ability to do their job. And unfortunately, the vagueness of the language in these contracts issued by wedding insurance companies allow them to kind of release responsibility, evade responsibility for the specific conditions of a pandemic.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Ivy, how have you communicated to your clients on, or rather, what have you communicated to your clients in terms of transitioning their event, or has the directive been just full on postponement for everything, or have you actually supported your clients to transition their event into something else?
Right. So back when I started to give this advice, which was the end of February, beginning of March, I was advising my clients to, if you've got a wedding that is through the end of May up until early June, you're going to need to postpone it until about 6 months from now. I would advise in October late October is the best time to be rescheduling those events. And any weddings and events happening in June or into July should be postponed until further notice.
Wow. And so have you been supporting them even in their communications to, and more specifically for those events that were in the spring or early summer, have there been any directives that you've given to engage with the attendees of the event, the attendees of the wedding? What has been some of the communication with that?
Absolutely. So the average guest count of a wedding is about 150 people. It's better than, reaching out to those guests by phone. It's much better to use your existing wedding website to distribute information and updates about your wedding, as well as those Facebook groups and the social media chat messages that you have with your wedding party and your wedding guests. If you have larger than 150 people coming to your wedding, then I recommended, contacting them by email with a Google form that allows them to indicate if they still plan on attending your wedding, and including in the description on that Google form, what wedding date you're rescheduling to.
That's great. And just for those listeners who are looking for some options of how to transform your event, Ivy, myself, and another colleague of ours is actually developing something that people can tap into to actually still continue to have their events. And of course, it's virtual. And so be on the lookout. If you're following this podcast, be on the lookout for more communications about how our particular company is responding to the crisis and helping people to transition their events and actually being able to have them still within this time. Ivy, I wanted to also ask you a little bit about budget and finances. So what are some of the financial best practices that you have encouraged your clients to use during this time?
Well, inside of my online wedding planning course, I offer couples the opportunity to consult with a financial relationship coach. This is a very small niche that doesn't really exist on a large scale as much as, wedding planners in the wedding industry. But if you think about it, couples are going to be jointly investing in their first big investment together in a wedding. It's not a house, it's not a car together, it's a wedding. And so my financial relationship coach partner, his name is Adam H. Cole. He really coaches couples through the difficult friend and family dynamics of talking to, family who has any kind of financial weight or decision-making power in the wedding planning, how to have those conversations and effectively communicate such that you have the financial wherewithal to match the dreams that you have for your wedding.
Right.
So consulting with a professional is my very first piece of advice to all couples.
I wonder too if there's also some reevaluating of the budget, right? So where before you might have had that $22,000 wedding or event in general planned, I'm sure in the aftermath of this, as we start to understand how events are moving and shaken, I could imagine that there's some budget cuts that are going to happen. Can you answer the question of maybe in light of the aftermath that is ahead of us, what do you think could be the expectation as a professional on those budget cuts, and with specificity in how is that going to affect us as a small business?
Right. It's going to have a big effect for small business. One thing that I ask couples to think about before they jump heavy into the wedding planning is, what are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you are not willing to budge on or negotiate about? And each couple has their own. It's not going to take a few hours or a day to come up with your list of non-negotiables. It takes a hearty conversation. And sometimes you think of those non-negotiables when you're like in the shower and, you're thinking about, I definitely want this, or I definitely can't have that. I have one bride that is got a big Puerto Rican family. And one of her non-negotiables was, okay, I need a particular type of rum at my wedding. Otherwise, we're not doing this.
Mark, right.
There's another bride that I had who said, you know what, whatever the venue is, I just hate carpet. I don't want carpet. I don't want to see carpet. There are very, very specific types of non-negotiables that people want to make sure are respected on their wedding day. And so I tell couples in this unprecedented time, you need to think about the things that you're absolutely not willing to budge on, because what you're going to spend your money on will matter, especially if you're experiencing these financial hardships. Are you gonna want flowers? Are you gonna require that you have your hair done by a particular hairstylist? Or is it very important to you to have professional photos, professional video, or for your family and friends who are far away and can't make it to your wedding to be able to participate in some kind of way? And a lot of times I'm seeing that couples absolutely want members who aren't going to be able to be in person because large gatherings are prohibited. A lot of couples with young and very old guests who are at risk, of immunocompromised, and they want to get married sooner than later so that those guests have an opportunity to see their loved ones get married.
Right. There's been this general consensus, I think, in conversations that I know I've had about this season is really about learning to get back to basics. And I even feel like in what you just said, in theory, you only get married once, or you only celebrate this particular event once. And it's your right to have all of your bells and whistles and all of your dreams and hopes and wishes. And I respect that. But I even think, too, what we're going to start looking at now is, what are the basics to be able to do what I'm trying to accomplish with my event? And I feel like after this season, we're all going to be experiencing this sort of, let me just look at what matters and what do I need to make this happen. That is an absolute necessity. So thank you for that. And thank you for what you're doing to make sure that people are still able to have these celebratory, monumental things happen in their lives. Because, there's some sayings that just because the world has stopped doesn't mean happiness has to.
That's right.
I want to transition a little bit to a rather heavy topic of the venue, right? We know that venues are suffering to a certain end here. So I have the wonderful and handsome Brett Collier here
The incomparable husband.
Thank you so much, Brett. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that your experience entails.
All right. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on this show. My name is Brett Collier. I am one of the co-founders of Cinch Events, an event production, creation, and management company. For this particular podcast, my expertise in coming from is a venue management, something I've been into for 10 plus years. Also really business management. A couple of different businesses before this. I was in real estate and lease option purchasing. That was the exit strategy that we really focused on, as well as my own entertainment production company with partner. Also background in health and wellness. I'm also a pastor at a church, a staff pastor. So there's a little hodgepodge mix of stuff, but really how I fell into the event industry was really producing theater in New York City, kind of started the trend, and actually fell into events in the sense of, live event, weddings, launches, product launches, all that kind of stuff, just fell into that out here, starting at a valet level, and then eventually working my way up to managing venues and working with a lot of different companies. Like I said, product launches, different things from, Audi to some Sony, Nordstrom and Aesop, and just a lot of those different things from some of the eclectic mix of the smaller to mid-size venue capacity range, typically under 500 in Los Angeles. Started with a company that went around to a lot of them, and then basically became kind of like an independent contractor, if you will, and going to some of these perennial favorites that are constantly on. Hey, what are some of the most creative venues in Los Angeles? What are some of the best places you can go? What are some of the ones that are off the beaten path?
Right.
And then just really working with the venue owners or the venue management company, and then of course the clients, and then coordinators, people at the operational capacity, people that are organizing the event.
So in your experience, and I know you've been sort of retired, if you will, from managing venues, but when you were at a venue and there was a normal crisis, I don't know if that's an oxymoron or not, but when there were normal crises, what have you noticed the trend is now in terms of a global pandemic? So for instance, if there was a smaller crisis in which maybe there was a small fire at the venue, that has those implications. But in terms of a pandemic, what are some of the effects that you're aware of on venue staff as well as other fellow venue managers?
Well, part one is the smaller crises when you have fires or you have a health crisis or someone has an emergency, cardiac arrest, someone's destroying the venue, just logistical issues or problems with, the authorities. They have to come and they have to either shut something down or you have to escort a guest out. Those type of problems are typically something that you're trained for as an event venue manager or site rep. A lot of times that's called. So you have the capacity and the experience and the training to actually be able to facilitate those matters in a way that benefits the venue. One of the big things is a venue manager, your job is to guide and protect, right? Or guide and to assist. That's kind of how that works at that level. When you talk about a global pandemic, I think you're talking, that's a vastly different
Right.
Just experience in general, because that's not something that is not in the training of a venue manager, not in the scope of a venue manager, not even probably in the actual control of what a venue manager can actually, figure out a plan to incorporate to kind of get out of that. I think that's absolutely, and from what I've heard from my colleagues during this time, that's actually absolutely something that the venue owner or the management company will execute some type of plan. Now, we're in an industry where, people analyze trends and data and all kinds of things to basically know how we're going to come out on the other side, or how they can plan accordingly, or what adaptations and what different things that they can do to adjust
Right.
To the current state of events, the state of events, our podcast.
Right.
But when you talk about a global pandemic, I mean, what trend or analyzation do you go off of? I mean,
Right.
Even economists are trying to, you try to go to the global financial crisis of 2008, right? Then you try to jump back to 1971 when you had the period of high stagflation, things like that. Then you jump all the way back to the Great Depression. But there is no data. There is no trend analysis that you can incorporate to kind of show, hey, let's plan and let's execute for this. I mean, even if you use that, you're talking about large gaps in time. The economy is different. The people are different. What we do is different.
Yeah.
What we consume is different. It's all different. So you start to see some of the venue, some of the venues in Los Angeles have, laid off their particular, more of their independent contractor workers, some of their, their venue managers, or if they're having staff to clean the venues, things like that. They try to keep their teams as much as they can. Those are the people who are, the marketing directors. Those are the people who are the operational directors, all that kind of stuff. They try to hold on to a little bit longer during what's kind of going on, to hopefully when we reopen this whole, when the dormancy of this period of COVID shuts down and we reopen events, when we reopen the economy, when we reopen commerce, you want to try to keep those on to basically help to navigate and come up with a plan.
I know you have a little bit of, well, not a little bit, but I know you have some a good amount of time that you spent in the real estate world. And so as you utilize some of that knowledge, how can we empower our event venue owners to actually stay afloat during this time? Is there something that, do they need to think by way of real estate when thinking about their venue, and whether or not to, you know, the obvious, let's just close our doors? Is there something else that venues can do in a way, you know, by way of real estate to make the best decisions for their venues during this time?
Well, yeah, I think so. My personal opinion, I think everybody needs to become an economist if you're a venue owner. I mean, quite frankly, real estate, you know, when you talk about real estate, you talk about, you know, market capitalization, gains, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, a lot of that, at least in the United States, is controlled by the Fed. So they're pumping out rates, they're doing that kind of stuff. I think you have to have an idea of where the economy, what's going on in the economy. Like I said, I don't know if there's too many forecast indicators. I listened to a podcast the other day with a guy who predicted the 2008 global financial crisis. He talked a lot about just some of the trends of quantitative easing, some of the things that the administration may try to do, but just a lot of it. But I mean, that's all theory, right? Because it's a global economic, you know, thing that's happening here. And and like I said, I think it's difficult to plan for that. But I think if you are a venue owner, you know, I mean, it's a get back to basics. And also, I think it's really like the sky is the limit. I mean, whatever is important to you and whatever the shifts are, I think that this is a time to be able to try it, or to maybe even be able to execute it. I mean, and I understand, like, there's a lot of fear in the climate as we know it. There's a lot of people who are worried about, you know, what's going to happen when we get out. But I think being innovative and being creative is what we've seen online. But I think, you know, even venue, particularly the venues that I've worked with, like, there's a certain clientele that they cater to and that can afford their venues. So, you know, coming out, you know, maybe with some type of price reductions to be able to now get people who weren't always able to get into the venue, you know, to, you know, 50% discount, or, you know, we'd love to have you, different things for the event or the community that you're in. I mean, that may take more income out of your pocket, and some venues may not be able to do that. But, you know, if we're getting back to basics and you're getting back to your neighborhood around, like, that's a great way to be able to do it, and to have an impact on the people around you, as well as your employees, and investing in them, or your independent contractors, because they're going to fight for you, however that may be. So there has to be a change in the psyche and in the thought of what you're doing during this time, I believe. Or you could go back to the regular thing, which a lot of people may go, and I don't know if that's going to yield fruit or not.
Right. I even think too, the clientele for many venue owners is going to change. And I think that's, although as someone who owns a venue might think, hey, I need to really capitalize off of, you know, when I reopen my doors, I need to just, you know, shoot for the stars. I think what we're actually going to see people do is say, you know, I'm actually opening up my doors to any clientele. which is a real thing. And I think that might be a good thing for some people. I mean, if we can imagine some of these, you know, venues that just seemed untouchable once upon a time, now, you know, we're all going to have to start working together. If you want the business, you either want the business or you don't. and not to say that, you know, all business is good business, because I actually believe the very opposite. All business ain't good business. However, I think that we really need to be thinking about, you know, what do I want to do with this space now? And if I am going to open it up to a clientele that I wasn't necessarily open to before, how is that going to pigeonhole me in the aftermath? Am I going to be able to sustain in the aftermath? To that point, how can a venue owner engage with not only current clientele that they might have had on the books, but how can they engage potential clientele during this time?
I think there's a lot of different ways. I think one that comes to mind is really, I think unity is always a great way to end or to get out of anything. And I think as venue owners, whereas we had our own specific market segmentation, where I was going after this client because of my venue for this, and like I just think that maybe more collaboration, figuring out a way to collaborate with others. I wouldn't know how that looks, but maybe a way to collaborate with others other venue owners, or some type of a alliance, or maybe being able to a partnership to really be able to reach. I mean, because the thing is you want to get people back into events. You want them to know like it's safe. You want them to know the fun that they have. You want them to know, hey, this is, look, you need a break or whatever it is, but, and also you can appeal to the humanity of people. So, I mean, coming to, those different kind of crossroads, being able to help the community, being able to do things that are different, being able to bring back some of your old customers or clientele. I mean, I think it's a variety. I think it's a mix of things. I think it's a blend of things. I think, coming out with whatever you're going to do out of the period of dormancy, and coming out directed with whatever you're going to do, and just move on it, and know that, you may not see the immediate fruit right away, but, you believe in it. Your heart is there. I think anybody that has a passion and a conviction in something is, that's going to read through in the decisions that they make and the ideas that they come up with. That's what I would say.
I think that something interesting is that after talking with Teresa on the nonprofit side, I think there might be something there. And if you're a venue owner who is listening, I'd be open to talking about this further, and maybe even establishing a relationship with Teresa. But I think that there's something for venues and nonprofits that needs to be explored right now. Obviously there probably already are those kind of relationships, but more strategically, I think that there's something for venue owners and nonprofits to actually, particularly in the aftermath, to partner with in a way strategically that you never have before. I think we're really going to see, this sort of collaborative effort in, if you own, particularly in Los Angeles or the other, major metropolitan cities, if you own a venue in Los Angeles, some of the most prime real estate in the world, if you have a venue in Los Angeles, it is going to be incredibly important for you to identify those nonprofit organizations, those more philanthropic organizations that, obviously I'm sure you have a discounted rate anyway that you rent your venue out for, but I think that there's something strategic in that, because a nonprofit organization doesn't necessarily have the capacity to rent your venue any other time. Like you were saying, and I'm going to open this up to sort of a dialogue at this point, but like you were saying, Teresa, two of the biggest things that nonprofits do are galas and whatever their fundraising push is for the year. And so those are really the only times when you reach out to a large venue that you maybe couldn't have afforded before. But now, as we head towards the aftermath of this and looking at that, I think that there's something to say, why don't we not just have a big, huge fundraiser at this venue, but this actually brings some awareness to this venue, and then the venue brings some awareness to the nonprofit. I think that is huge and something to kind of tap in. Teresa, do you have any feedback on that, or do you see anything with that?
Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, I think there's a ton of potential for partnerships, and you've seen this in certain ways already in different large cities where convention centers are now getting turned into homeless shelters and things like that. So there's a lot of creative use for space right now that because certain spaces aren't able to be used, right? So I think that's one thing during the immediate crisis, is how can we collaborate our efforts, right? Because a lot of nonprofits would love to service a larger group of people, but they can't because they don't have space, right? But I think I love that you were thinking that way, because I think in the future, there will be times when it's like, if a nonprofit could see how they could benefit and bless their city and the businesses in it, right? Such as event venues. And if event venues could see how opening their doors a little bit wider and allowing some space for awareness for the nonprofits in their city who service marginalized people, whether it be those coming out of sex trafficking, those in prostitution, the at-risk youth, or people who are struggling with poverty and homelessness, if they can at all do something to help better the lives of people in their neighborhood, in their city, that does so much. not only do you have more joy and pride in what you're doing, but it does so much for all of your other clientele. It's good for like it sounds kind of, it's good for people and it's good for business. Does that make sense? So yeah, I just love that you're thinking that way, and I'm excited to. That's just my initial thought. I'm like, yeah, let's figure it out. Let's do it. But yeah, and there's so many types of fundraisers that require big events. And if there's a way to partner together in a more intentional fashion, even if it's like not just for your big gala, but how can that venue also help with some of, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Innovation, exactly.
Right. I want to kind of open it up for all of us to engage in a little bit of dialogue on this next question, because I think, as we start preparing the minds and the hearts of people in our industry, and for those of you listening, the point of this podcast is not necessarily always to have a topic about the pandemic. However, it is on our minds every day. In a general sense, this is, the intent of this podcast is more so to, remain current and provide content for our industry as it relates to what's going on from a current event standpoint. And so as we kind of forecast the aftermath of this, how can I, as a professional, walk out of this season and not walk out of here dazed and confused and, oh, what have I been doing with my time? But how can we walk out of this season directed? I think it all comes down to what perspective and what lens you walk in this season. If everything it is a crisis, and we have to recognize that, and you have to even grieve the losses, right? And in the event industry, like you grieve the loss of your venue or your whatever changing or your date changing and all of the big things, right? But at the same time, if we can look at it as an opportunity for innovation and for creative solutions that we would have never thought of in any other time period, I think that we can come out of this not dazed, but rather, I don't remember what you said, not dazed, directed. And I also think that if we can settle it on the inside of us that things will not be the same, that will help us to more quickly engage and move forward. Yeah, grieving it, but also just letting it go and being like, all right, we got to move forward. If we come back to pre-COVID days by some miracle, awesome, amazing, wonderful. But if we don't, this is the way forward. And just being okay if we fumble a little bit, because we will, right? So giving yourself a lot of grace. Right. Yeah. Teresa, before you loop out, we're going to continue our conversation, but before you loop out, can you tell our listeners how to get involved with what you're doing, how to find you if they're a potential client, and also how can we find you on social? What is your social handle? All that good stuff. Okay. Yeah, you can find Chasing Fences at chasingfences.com. It's my events website. And then just for me personally, it's my name, Teresa Babbitt, on Instagram. And if you are interested in hearing more about either nonprofits that are focused on global issues and cross-cultural things, or some really fun nonprofits in the LA area that I just love to gush about, I would love to talk to you. It would just be so fun. So yeah. Oh, great. Thank you. And it's been so, yeah, you're welcome. It's been an honor to just talk to you guys, and so fun. So thank you for including me. I feel very, very happy and honored. I don't know what else to say. It's been so fun. How do I say it without sounding really cheesy? So good. Thank you so much. Of course, I'll be with you, and you take care, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Ivy and Brett, so the question remains for you, in the aftermath of the pandemic, how can we walk out of this season directed and not dazed?
Yeah, I have to say, to Teresa's point, constraints force creativity, and there are just some creative solutions that we would not have otherwise had the chance to discover unless, this pandemic or something akin to this were upon us. And, with that said, I've seen some creative solutions already, some venues that promote their partner catering companies, that they promote to couples. If you pay a minimum of, say, like $5,000 to this caterer on your rescheduled wedding date, the couple can get our venue free of charge, for example. And some really interesting partnerships that, they're working together to be able to thrive in the industry that we'll see in the world as we will know it later. And I think that there are opportunities for, event coordinators and wedding planners to give back to a couple's preferred nonprofit that can help provide relief to COVID victims and frontline responders in ways that, they wouldn't have otherwise chosen to give back. Or connected their wedding guests with ways to give back to the event industry and to first responders simultaneously. These are just ideas that I wouldn't have thought of on my own unless we were all talking about them together. So some really cool solutions on the way.
Yeah, that's so good. And how about for venue owners? I feel like, in the context of being impacted, obviously our industry in general, I mean, the very word event implies some kind of social gathering of sorts. And so obviously I think we are one of the most significantly impacted industries during this time because we can't do what our very job is, and that's to create an event, in theory, with people at it. And I think venue owners are at the top of that impact as well, because obviously they can't have the event at their space. And so how do we see even venue owners sort of coming out of this directed and not dazed during this time?
I think that there's the realization and actual coming to terms, and also really acknowledgement of the simple fact that there has been a pandemic. There's people who are suffering, and there's people who the mind state of them has been changed, whether they lost someone personally, whether they lost a lot of things economically, and just really understanding and coming to terms with that, and really in understanding and empathizing, and first knowing that exists, and then actually being able to come out with a pre-thought out plan, and then being able to adapt and try a lot of these new and creative ways. I love what you said, Ivy, with different ways to be able to help, different ways to be able to bear a burden for someone, and then come out with a plan, and then come out directed, and come out with something that might be a little bit newer, something that might be revisiting some of the older things that may have worked, whatever it is, but a blend, and being willing to adapt. And being willing to adapt and to see what's happening, and to understand what the people are going through, especially your past customers and your future customers. So that's how I think that they can come out a little direct.
Yeah, it's so good. I know, Ivy, you wanted to chime in on the topic of the venue. Do you also have maybe some best practices on coming out of this time as a venue owner, coming out of this time a little bit more directed rather than dazed?
Well, I see that many couples are going to be getting married later in the year. We have in America around 60 million couples that get married every year. That's
Wow.
a lot. So I'm really curious to know if the demand for wedding vendors of different categories, but also primarily venues, like, is that demand going to go up? What are going to be the responses to the demands going up? Are the prices going to go up because of demand, or is there going to be no change price, or even a lower discounted incentive rate for keep the venues fuller for more frequently during the holidays, where we normally see only holiday parties, your occasional New Year's Eve wedding? Is that going to be totally booked because people are trying to reschedule to have an event as early as possible as per the CDC guidelines? I don't know how that's going to work, and I'm not sure how pricing across the wedding industry, including venues, is going to change because of that at the end of 2020 and beginning of 2021. Do you have any thoughts or enumerations about that?
I think it's interesting, and I think one thing that is going to be important for, I mean, obviously Brett can talk a little bit better about just in terms of like a real estate mindset. But I think what's important for venue owners to really consider during this time is just as we said, bringing it back to basics. But I also feel just in the context of what all a venue means to someone, I think it's, and in the context of celebratory events, it's going to be really important to build and establish hope in people again. As soon as our doors are open, as soon as our borders are back open again, it's going to be incredibly important for those of us who hold, I would say, I use this word loosely, but those of us that hold the power within the context of the event industry ecosystem, it's going to be really important for those people who have the majority of that power to instill hope. To say, hey, we just are concentrating this first month after quarantine, we're concentrating on celebration events. That's all we're doing. It's going to be very important for venue managers, as well as some of those, more coordinator manager roles. It's going to be very important to establish hope within your clientele base, within all of your touch base, because quite honestly, as we were even talking last night, Brett and I, there's going to be some fear after this that people have. And
Right.
And as we all know, we're going to slowly start rolling out, things, and we're going to slowly start rolling out, going around people again, getting too close in proximity to each other. When is the mask going to end? When are we not going to wear these gloves and masks anymore? Who knows? And so if all of that continues after this pandemic sort of lifts a little bit, there's going to be this need for hope, right? There's going to be this need for, hey, I need to trust our world again, or I need to be able to trust coming outside of my house again. And so I think it's a great opportunity for us in our industry to be hope agents, to be communicators of hope and say, hey, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Come to my space. Look how I've decked it out, to align to the CDC regulations. I even remember I believe in our first episode, one of our contributors, Zoe Moore, she even talked about like, have some fun masks at your event after this, so that it's more like, we're inside our guidelines, but we're not allowing our guidelines to instill fear. We're allowing our guidelines to inform us
Or to prevent.
and to help prevent, but we're also using what we have to do within our guidelines. We're actually using it to our advantage to instill hope and promise in people.
Right. And in that regard, I think that there's going to not be one rollout back to normalcy. It's going to be a few phases, right? And so we have to plan as planners and as venue managers, right? Like what does that 2-phase rollout look like for people, and how do we communicate that, right?
And I think you said it too, Ivy, like it's an enigma of what it's going to look like. So like, this is where leaders lead, because what's going to happen is, all of the trends with everything, like who knows about demand, right? Like in the United States, the market's down. I don't know about Greece, and I don't know about some of the other places, but I could probably say that there's a pretty consistent trend that most of the markets are down. People aren't necessarily buying, unless you have a lot stored away for either a rainy day, or you just understand, the different things that are going to happen. Like, that's the whole reason why you have stimuluses, right? Like, because there's a fear that when people come back into the economy as we know it, they're not going to spend. It's work, not spend, because you don't know what's going to happen. And that's where leading by creativity, leading by instilling hope, leading by assertion of, hey, it's going to be all right, leading by, we're going to do this to basically compensate, leading by understanding and bearing that, hey, I understand what you're going through. I know things have been bad, but like, hey, we've been through so much other stuff, and we're here to support you, and we're here to collaborate together to change the dynamic and the culture and the climate that currently exists. And I think that's the importance, because the unknown is where the fear creeps in.
Right.
And because of there's no data or trend analysis, and you've got some people speaking the doom of what can happen and the hope of what may happen, and then people are in the middle and they're like, we don't know which way to lead.
Right.
It's all through
a lost
demonstration,
sheep.
and it's all through, but people are going to experience very real effects. Some of the people will experience very real effects. Venue owners, as well as clients, customers, organizers, coordinators, producers, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But that's something that's just happening as we readjust, reacclimate, or just go in a completely different direction.
Right.
I see that, like, that word demonstrate is like, that really struck a chord with me, because however we demonstrate as an industry, how we're going to roll out back into normalcy, I think it's going to help inform customers and our clients, like, the significance of our role in creating an experience for them. I mean, a lot of times I hear from couples, well, yeah, like, I don't know how much an event planner is really like worth, or like why it costs so much. Now they are starting to understand, because we see the world without us in a way that is crippling for people who really depended on event producers. And I think that's going to be really important.
Yeah, so good. This has been such an informative, but also a very hopeful conversation, because I think that when we have tools on what to do, moving forward, it just creates this sense of happiness within us. It's like, oh wow, like I have perspective now on what's to come, even though what's to come is completely unknown. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Ivy. I appreciate you tuning in from Greece.
This was awesome. This is so much fun. And, it gives me hope that our industry is going to really thrive after this, having these conversations and being collaborative in so many new ways. Like, thank you for pulling people together on this podcast and sharing literally the state of events. I appreciate you and what you do.
Thank
Both of you.
you. And thank you,
you,
Brett,
guys.
for sitting right next to me in our home. This house has literally become everything. We're a studio by day, we're homeschooling by the afternoon, we're a schoolhouse, and then Brett has coined our apartment Cafe 314 because we're experimenting with food so much.
I love it.
But thank you for contributing on the venue side. I think it's important for our venue owners to know that we stand with you as an event professional. Like, we may not own the real estate, but we understand, and we partner with you in understanding that, it's a tough time. It's a tough time, but we're very hopeful. So thank you all so much for joining. Listeners, if you are just joining in, go ahead and just reload and restream, because we're at the end of our conversation, but we have been addressing the impact that specific sectors of our industry have been experiencing, and also to what is the future for events. And so thank you so much to our contributors today. If you want to continue to follow our podcast, please join us at a Cinch event. And Ivy, can you also tell people how to find you and what some of your handles are?
Yes, absolutely. On Facebook, you can find me at Voulez Events. That's VOULEZ Events. It means you want in French. You want events. On Twitter, you can find me at Voulez Events and also at Like a Pro Wedding. You can find me on Instagram at Voulez Events and at plan.like.a.pro.
Awesome. And then when can we be expecting that wonderful, I've been calling it the Thomas Guide for Events. When can we look forward to your book release?
Yes, Poise Over Panic, How to Plan a Wedding in a Pandemic. It's going to be published by this weekend. So right before May, you will get to see Poise Over Panic available in your ebook shop or wherever you get your audiobooks.
Can't wait.
So great. And Brett, how can we follow you, and how can we inquire with you about what it is that Cinch Events does?
You can always follow us at Cinch Events on Instagram, and also you can email us at info@a-cinch-event, or you can check out our website at www.acinchevent.com, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you all so much for joining. It's been a pleasure to be able to resource you today. And please make sure that you look into our previous podcasts in which we have addressed COVID-19 as well. And we look forward to being able to engage with you in our upcoming series, which is a series on resilience in May. So make sure you follow us at a Cinch event. Thanks so much, listeners. Bye.